So I technically should have talked about this character a while ago when I was doing like the Alabasta section of the royals and rulers, leaders type stuff. I should have talked about Koza then, because he is like the leader of like the revolutionary army that happens there, and he is also at this point in time later became the environmental minister for Alabasta. So I probably should have talked about him there, but I didn't, so I'm making up for that now by pairing him here with the Gedatsu video, because he appears in the Gedatsu cover page series. So, Koza. No last name. Just Koza. He is a childhood friend of Vivi. They were members of the San clan together. He was the leader of the San clan. He later became the leader of the Alabasta Revolution, which we'll get into. And then he is, I think it's his more current title is like the environmental minister of the environment for Alabasta. So he does hold a position, and he is 22 years old. So he's like, 20 when we meet him in the story. So he's a couple of years older than V. But just going into him. So, in regards to Koza, the earliest time that we see him is when him and Vivi are children. We see Koza and his father, Toto, having gone to the castle at Alubarna. They live in an unnamed village outside of Alubarna, but that's where Koza is primarily raised. And then when he's about 9 years old, they end up going to the castle because there is a drought that is affecting their home, that is affecting the village. And they go to the castle to talk to King Cobra for allowing, to ask for relief. And Koza actually kind of yells at him about, like, why is he allowing so many villagers to suffer? Like, he's allowing this to happen. Like, he's allowing them to have a drought. And, of course, in the mind of, like, a 9-year-old kid, it's kind of like, well, he's the king, so he should be in charge of being able to help us. So if he's not helping us, then that means he's allowing this to happen. Is kind of where that comes from. And Cobra, who does not take offense at this at all. Toto is very worried that Cobra is going to take offense at this, but Cobra does not. He patiently explains to Koza that, like, no king can control the forces of weather. No king can do that. And Toto is like, has like restrained Koza, is like begging for forgiveness for his son's actions, for the way that Koza was talking. And Cobra is just, he's like, it's fine. He actually, Cobra expresses admiration to Koza for his fierce courage and the love of his people. And he does promise that the royal fund for the village's relief, he promises money from that to help with the village's relief, and even offering to resettle Koza and his family in Alubarna. So again, and like we learn, of course, throughout the course of the story that King Cobra is one of the very, very good rulers in One Piece, one of the actually true good rulers. He is unfortunately, as I have mentioned in many, many videos, is unfortunately gone now, sadly. But he was a very good representation of like what a good king can be. And like we see Dalton try to replicate that. We know that Riku in Dressrosa is another very good example of that same thing, with Neptune in the Ryukyu Kingdom in Fishman Island. We know that they are very much very good rulers of their respective kingdoms, and even like Iceberg is a very good mayor of Water 7. They take the safety and the happiness of their people as very, very high priority, as we see throughout the course of those other arcs, for those different kings. And we see that in, throughout the course of Alabasta with Cobra. And Koza kind of gets this glimpse into that here with, Cobra, like, if he had, like, if Koza had yelled at, like, Stelly about this, Koza would have been executed for his actions. But that's not the kind of king that Cobra is. Cobra is was a very kind and honest ruler who genuinely cared about his people. And adored the heck out of his daughter. But what ends up happening is, Toto, Koza's father, is immediately grateful for offering to resettle them. But Koza accuses the king of belittling their pain and acquit his audience in a tearful rage. So Koza is just like, you're just making fun of us. And then he runs out of the runs out, where he ends up encountering 5-year-old Vivi and Karu. Karu's not 5 at this point in time, but Vivi is there and Karu is with her because, of course, Karu was always with Vivi. Side note, I know stuff is out with trailers. I don't think this will be up after the live action comes back. I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't remember how this is going to land. But, I know we haven't seen anything of, Karu in the trailers, which I love Karu. I understand that they may probably not have been able to give both the funds for, making sure Chopper looks good for the animation and making sure that Karu looks good for the animation, for how much Karu would be in from all the Whiskey Peak stuff all the way through. So hopefully Karu will show up in Alabasta when we get to that for season 3, but we'll see what happens. But, I get that. I love Karu. I love him in the anime. I love him in the manga. But, Karu. But, so Koza comes across Vivi and they end up actually getting into a fight because she, mocks his tears and then goads him into a fight. This, of course, eventually ends up, Vivi shows back up and her dad's like, what happened to you? And she's like, nothing. I kind of, fought that kid. Igaram gets angry, but, Cobra holds Igaram back from going to go get Koza. So, we get that. Scratched and bloodied, but defiant, Vivi, Igaram is he tries to go after Koza, but he's Cobra stops him and everything. It's just childhood squabble. It's fine. And, he leaves his proposals open to Toto and his family. So, I love that he's just it's fine. It's a childhood squabble. Vivi, Koza, the Alabasta royal family, the Nefeltaris, seem to not have a huge amount of difference between them and their citizens. There is this amount of respect and admiration from the citizens for Vivi and Cobra, particularly after everything that happened with everything revealed about Crocodile and everything. There was a huge amount of appreciation and respect and admiration and stuff like that towards Vivi and Cobra at that point in time. And Igaram and Pell and Chaka and everything like that for what they did for their country and Koza as well. But what we're gonna see here is this Vivi Koza and his parents kind of end up resettling in a small farm on the outskirts of Alabarna. And Koza ends up gathering up a dozen or so of the local children, and they end up forming a gang called the Sand Clan. And then eventually Vivi learns about this gang, and she makes her way to where they are, has made her way out of the palace and makes her way to where they're playing, and she demands a rematch with Koza. And ends up I want a rematch, and whoever is the winner is the leader of this clan. And she still can't beat him because he's got a couple of years on her, and she can't beat him, but they're impressed with each other enough, and this is enough to win his friendship. Because she is this princess who has come out of the castle and is wants to physically prove herself to try to be part of this group, and he names her the clan's deputy, or the co-leader type of stuff of the Santan clan. And Cobra is fully aware of this. Him and Igaram are spying on them in the bushes, which is just adorable, and just it's oh, she made friends, yay type of stuff, which is just adorable. because I mean, like, Vivi had like Pell and Chaka and Igaram and like Karu and stuff like that as like her friends, but she didn't really have friends that were around her own age, and this gives her that outlet. And so what ends up, they end up, exploring Alubarna, and like, end up in some of the ruins, and they kind of make that kind of like their secret base, kind of near the clock tower. So it's just like this fun area for them to explore. And like, Cobra and Igaram, who probably have other royal duties they need to be dealing with for like government and stuff like that, but they're out like following the kids around, which is just funny. And like, I know that like Pell and Chaka end up out there as well. I think like keeping an eye on them, just to, make sure that nothing's happening. Cobra approves of the outings, and he judges that Koza and his friends are this positive influence on Vivi and Karu to a degree in regards to her development as a future ruler. So, so he's happy about that. And, he has Igaram, Chaka, Pell, and himself occasionally go out and monitor them to make sure that all is well. And for the most part, it is. It's, it's the kids having fun and stuff like that. Unfortunately, one of the outings ends up turning dangerous when a bunch of bandits show up, and they're there to try to kidnap Vivi for ransom. And without hesitation, Koza, along with the other Sansan clan members, like, they put themselves between Vivi and the bandits to protect Vivi, because she is their friend. She has proved herself as their friend to them. And vice versa, and like they care about her, so they like put themselves between her and the bandits to protect her, and with their lives. Unfortunately, the kids all end up getting beaten up, and Vivi and Koza end up getting grabbed by the accomplices of the bandit, and they get they taken to some other nearby ruins. Or like Vivi gets taken, and then Koza ends up following them. Cobra and Igaram end up showing up. They see that the kids have been beaten up. Some of the kids explain what happened, and like they run after Vivi, and like they get like medical treatment for the kids. And so Koza has managed to make his way, follow them, and ends up making his way to where the bandits have Vivi, and he has made like a makeshift club. And even though he has wounds, he is there like trying to protect Vivi, and he ends up getting like a scar over a cut over one of his eyes. And like he's there like trying to protect Vivi to the best of his ability. The Koza's efforts enrage the bandits, which is not good. Thankfully, he is able to stand up to them long enough for Pell and Chaka to show up, along with Igaram and Cobra, and they are able to beat up all of the bandits, beat them unconscious. Unfortunately, Koza had gotten injured badly enough that he ends up... Hi, you okay? Come here. Come here and I can pet you. Do you want me to open the door? I opened the door for him. He went out. He came back in. Take your pick. And Koza unfortunately gets injured bad enough that he ends up passing out. And when he wakes up again, he is in Alubarna Castle. And he ends up, he's got like bandages around his eye where he got hurt. And he is like very happy that the others are okay. And he ends up, Vivi is like off to the side, and she is just like in tears. Not because of the attack itself, but because Koza and the others, their willingness to die for her, their willingness to protect her. And she was just like, that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted friends. I didn't want like that type of a thing. And Koza has now become even more determined than ever to fight for his beliefs and those of his friends, and he ends up getting like combat lessons from Chaka, which is kind of cute. Although he doesn't have any real great skill, but he's an average student, so I'm like, okay, that's fair. Then we get into the birth of Yuba, which is kind of like the next section of their childhood. So sometimes after the bandit incident, what ends up happening is Toto has accepted this new proposal from from Cobra to go and try to convert the oasis of Yuba out in part of the desert, make it into a proper town. And, he's excited by this prospect, and him and Koza and his wife all head out to start this new settlement, to start building up this new settlement, along with like a couple of dozen other families or so, with kind of like Toto in charge. And like they head out, like they're given, congratulations by the king, and the king, Cobra and Vivi and such, and the other Sansan clan members kind of send them off. They like kind of officially, unofficially end the Sansan clan though. And like, this is kind of like the last time that Vivi and Koza kind of see each other. And what ends up happening is, of course, they send each other off on like very good terms. She wants him to, hopefully, this to succeed. He wants her to become like a great princess and all this other stuff, become a great ruler. And so, this is kind of like the last time that they see each other. And for quite a while, Yuba is actually prospering. It's like promising and everything is going pretty well. And then, unfortunately, because of the machinations of Crocodile, it ends up going very, very badly. And like the town starts to dry up. There's the horrible sandstorms that keep coming. And of course, over the next several years, stuff just gets worse and worse and worse. During that time frame, Crocodile's like causing all of these problems. He's bringing in the dance powder to, affect it so it looks like Cobra is making it only rain in like Alubarna and in like rain dinners or in rain base. So like he's like, Crocodile's causing all of these problems. And like Koza is seeing all of this, and he is of course essentially falling for the problem. And Toto's faith has just remained completely unwavering in Cobra. He still believes in Cobra and Vivi and all this other stuff. He does not think that Cobra is actually doing this. Koza, unfortunately, kind of refuses to believe this. He doesn't think that this lack of rain is natural. And, he ends up going and, Koza ends up going and ends up being before Cobra again, and he ends up, yelling at him of like belittling a subject's pain, and Koza ends up joining the revolution. The rebellion. So there's like the whole setup here where it's just like, was this at this point in time, was this Mr. 2 pretending to be Cobra that had this conversation with Koza and had Cobra seem very heartless at this point in time? Or was this actually Cobra here not quite realizing the extent to the problem that things were happening in Yuba and other areas around the country? I'm thinking it was Mr. 2 that he ended up interacting with during this time frame, but I don't know if we ever get a full answer on that one. Then we cut ahead, and of course, to the more time frame where the story is starting, where we're getting like the Alabasta saga itself. And during this time frame, we know that Koza has become the leader of the rebel army within the kingdom. There is always this question, or there's kind of this question that comes up where it's just like, did Koza have any contact with like Dragon and the Revolutionary Army there? Like, was there ever any communication between the two of them? Was it Dragon like knew that Cobra was a good leader, so he wasn't going to try to do anything against Cobra? Was it something else? We never get that answer. Question that we never got the answer to. During this whole time frame, Vivi and Igaram have gone off and left the country to investigate the matter as to what's going on. They make their way into Baroque works, blah, 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 blah. And Koza has no idea that Vivi is doing this. They're just kind of like, Vivi is like missing at this point in time. So he's kind of worried about that. And Koza is, of course, completely unaware that Crocodile is the one causing all of these problems for Alabasta and stuff like that. And so he's, developed, he has left Yuba. He has set up the base in the oasis town of Katoria, I think is what it is. Just because of how bad things is. Toto has stayed in Yuba and is continuing to try to find water. which of course comes up later. But so we get some of that, and of course we have, Koza is, building up this army. We of course have it that like Vivi is of course reading about some of this stuff in the newspaper for like this army building up in Alabasta against them, and she knows that Koza is the leader of the army. So when her and the Straw Hats are on their way back, she's like, okay, when we get to there, we need to make our way to where the rebel army is, so that way I can talk to Koza and I can try to settle this matter and explain to him that it's Crocodile that's making all of these problems, not my father, not our family. So we have that, and of course we know that Crocodile's plan is to try to like prevent Vivi and Koza from interacting with each other, because he knows that that'll be a problem in his plan if that happens. So Koza during this time frame ends up, Koza has been, him and his rebels and stuff like that have been building up their army. They are like in Nanohana, or they are in some of the other places where they're, building up their army, and they end up having this little boy, Kappa, who wants to join, and like Koza kind of is like scaring him out of it, because he doesn't want this little kid joining their army because he knows it's dangerous. So he kind of scares him out of it, which is kind of funny. He doesn't want children enlisting in the army. It's not just Kappa, it's like all of the children. He doesn't want the children enlisting in the army. Fair. And the thing is that during this whole time frame, Koza is kind of viewing Crocodile as being kind of this ally, because Crocodile, of course, is like a warlord, and he doesn't know that Crocodile is in charge of Baroque Works. But, they have this, Crocodile seems to be the one like protecting the citizens, and of course that's part of Crocodile's plan, is to make it look like he's the one that is protecting the citizens, so that way if they overthrow Cobra, they're more likely to want to put him on the throne so he can get a hold of any of the secrets that he needs to for Alabasta and all of that stuff. Not what ends up happening, obviously. But that's like the plan there. And like Koza is unfortunately falling for this. And we do have one of the incidents that happens, and this is after the Straw Hats have arrived in the country, but like Koza ends up hearing that Cobra is visiting Nanohana, and he ends up, it's Cobra, it's Mr. 2 as Cobra, impersonating him. And what ends up happening is, of course, Koza shows up there. Cobra ends up confessing that he has brought this route through the rain dance, overuse, and everything else like that. And he orders his soldiers, other Baroque Works agents, to just like destroy the entire city. Like they shoot Koza, they start destroying the city. The fake Cobra ends up kicking the little boy. All of this stuff just to like make Cobra look like he's just horrid. And so it's like they just started like destroying this city and just causing a ton of destruction all over it. And like Cobra, of course, leaves. Makes it look like he, like he had one of his soldiers shoot Koza in cold blood and all of this stuff. So, that's part of the plan. It's supposed to, make Koza wounded, but he still is going to fight, because now he's completely lost whatever little faith in his king that he had left. It's completely gone now. And the little boy, Kappa, actually ends up seeing that Cobra is not Cobra, that he's Mr. 2. He gets beaten up by Mr. 1 and Miss Doublefinger. And then Koza sees this and thinks that sees him beat up afterwards and thinks that this is more stuff being done to the little kid by the Alabasta guards, by the royal guards. So it's just like this feeding cycle, because like the little kid can't tell him what actually happened. That no, that's not the king. That's some weird guy that really likes to dance and act like a swan. Weird fashion sense, but you do you, but please stop trying to impersonate our king and cause problems type of stuff. So we have that. But Koza and his troops, now nearing about 2 million, bolstered with, thousands of weapons from Baroque Works, to bolster them and everything else like that. After the Nanohana attack, they end up making their way toward the main gates of Alabarna. During this time frame, this also, of course, when Vivi and the Straw Hats are making their way to Alabarna as well. They've dealt with, like, Crocodile and Rain Dinners and Rain Base and all that stuff. And, like, Luffy has tried to fight Crocodile for the first time, and now the others have shown up at Alabarna. And they, it's, the whole plan is to, subterfuge, to distract them, so they think that, Vivi and the others have all made their way inside, where Vivi and Karu are actually waiting outside the gates to try to confront Koza and the rebels. Unfortunately, that doesn't go well. It's essentially like, the two ships passing in the night, because there's, like, all this smoke and everything else, and smoke and sand and all this stuff all over the place, as, like, the rebel army is, like, charging toward Alabarna, and, like, Vivi is standing here screaming at them, trying to get Koza's attention. Doesn't end up working. And it ends up, of course, they just miss each other. And the rebels are making their way through Alabarna, just overrunning everything. Eventually Koza ends up making his way to the castle to hopefully try to force Cobra to surrender. Unfortunately, when he gets there, he finds that not all is as it has seemed. Cobra is impaled to the wall of the castle in the gardens, with Crocodile and Robin there. Vivi is there crying. Chaka is trying to explain what happened. And it's essentially this whole bit where it's like Vivi is explaining, and like Crocodile essentially just comes out and explains his, machinations, and that Cobra is innocent and all this stuff, and that he has been, kind of encouraging all of, all of Koza's misguided efforts and all of this stuff. And, Koza is just so mad at himself for, like, falling for this and everything else like that. He's, like, so angry at himself. And, like, Koza tries to fight back. And, Cobra is explaining, Crocodile explains he's going to unleash this massive bomb in the city square. And, Koza, Vivi is ordering all of the guards and Koza to, like, make white flags to make them surrender. So that way, mutual surrender, so they can stop the fighting, so they can go and try to find the bomb. This does not work. They try to do it. Koza ends up getting shot by one of the other Baroque's people that's hiding in the military. And of course, this looks like he's now been, trying to, attempt an attempted assassination, while he's trying to, get them to surrender and everything else like that. So, that's not helping. And so we get, like, all of this stuff is happening at the same time this is happening. Like, well, all of the battles are happening between, the Straw Hats and the Baroque Works members. And of course, Vivi, Luffy showing up again and helping Vivi and trying to fight Crocodile again. And then, of course, ended up, going to the tomb and fighting Crocodile there. Is, of course, what's happening during all of this. And, the fighting is just it's just persisting. It just keeps going and getting more and more vicious, because there's the fake guards who are, the Baroque's workmen who are pretending to be guards, who, like, they have, like, this freaking symbol on their arm. Just notice that they're not your actual guards. And they keep causing more problems by, like, attacking the rebels more, making it look like the rebels are attacking the other guards more to incite more violence. And that's just getting worse and worse and worse. What ends up happening is, of course, Luffy is thankfully able to defeat Crocodile, and then Vivi really want this to be something of, like, Conqueror's Hockey being affecting the weather type stuff for Vivi. That it starts raining, and Koza and the other, it starts raining, and it's not just in the capital. I think it's, like, raining all over the country at this point in time. And so it just starts raining. I think it's all over. And this, like, brings the war to an end. And, Pell, of course, sacrifices himself to, take care of the bomb and everything else like that. Pell survives, thankfully. But the bomb gets taken care of. And at this point in time, like, almost immediately after, he does see Vivi again. And then he just heads back to Yuba to, like, help his father with rebuilding Yuba. And then we know that Koza does listen to Vivi's speech over the Denden, which she has it broadcast over the whole country. He does listen to that, which is, just nice. He gets to, hear his friend talk and all of this stuff. I would assume that, like, Vivi and Koza end up having, like, they maybe, like, rekindle their friendship. And yes, I'm one of the ones that ships Vivi and Koza because I just think they're very cute together. Type of stuff. And so I hope that they have rekindled their friendship better. We know that Koza ends up being, like, the Minister of the Environment eventually. And he's, hopefully taking that pretty seriously. Then we get into the, Gedatsu's Accidental Blue Sea Life, the cover page series where Koza does appear. And essentially what ends up happening is, it's a bit after what happens in Alabasta, but what ends up happening is, it's essentially Koza is walking along one day, and out of, like, one of the springs that they have pops a giant mole in a helmet with his Uncle Goro and this random other guy named Gedatsu who has wings and who does not seem to know how to be normal. They pop up, they explain that they've built hot springs and blah, 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 blah. They found hot springs, and, like, him and his father, like, and Koza and Goro and Toto and Karu and Gedatsu all head back. And, like, now there's just, like, this big thing of, like, hot springs going on there on Ukari Island that now Koza has a direct connection to because of his uncle. And of course we know that, like, they all end up hanging out in the hot springs and everything else like that. So that's just kind of a nice thing there. Then we cut ahead to after the 2-year time skip, we have the Decks of the World. And, after the Straw Hats are reunited in Sabaody, Koza is very happy. He's kind of aware of that because he knows that that'll make Vivi happy, that her friends are back together. And, we see him reading about the Straw Hats. Then we get into the Zou arc, and we do see Koza and Toto here as Vivi and her father and Alabasta, like, their retinue, are heading off to the Reverie. And of course, they're, saying goodbye to them, wishing them luck, all this other stuff. And Alabasta is much more prospering at this point in time because the rain dance powder isn't being used anymore. The country is becoming much more vibrant again. All this stuff. And so, we're getting a lot of that stuff. And then we get into the most recent stuff that we have seen with Koza, or at least most recent that we have seen as of this video. Or as of the recording of this video. And this is during the Egghead stuff. And we do see that during the Egghead events that Koza and Toto, along with the other residents of Alabasta, are watching the broadcast from Vegapunk. Now, one of the questions I have about this is, we saw the reactions of some of the people in Alabasta when it was revealed that Cobra had been assassinated, when they found out about it in the newspaper. And we know that at this point in time that, Igaram is trying to do his best to try to find Vivi, all this other stuff. Him and Karu are trying to find Vivi with, like, all the missing posters and all this other stuff. And I kind of, I think Oda could have done a slightly better job with, like, where Koza is during all of this. Because, like, Koza is supposed to be Vivi's friend. And I really would have liked it if we saw him, having a reaction to Cobra's assassination, to finding out about that, because, like, he knows that Cobra is a good king. And he is very confused as to why Sabo from the Revolutionary Army would be the one to go after him when they usually go after the bad kings and rulers and stuff like that. So you would think that that would have been a nice thing to see there, to see Koza's reaction to this. But we don't get that. And then we also don't really have a reaction from him for Vivi missing. That would be a nice thing to see from him as well. We know that he does watch the Vegapunk broadcast about what's going on there and about, like, all the science and all this other stuff and about how, the oceans are rising and all this other stuff. And he kind of speculates over Vegapunk's death with his father there. But the thing is that, like, Koza via Vivi kind of knows that the Straw Hats are good people. Well, good is a relative term, but good people. And, like, he might know that, like, I don't think this seems like something that they would do. Like, why would they kill Vegapunk? That doesn't seem right from the way that Vivi talks about them. That seems weird. So, I don't know. I kind of wish we got a little bit more about Koza in regards to some of his reactions to like Cobra's assassination and to Vivi missing and stuff like that. That would be nice to get some, interaction from him about that. But again, I'm not the author, so what are you gonna do? I don't really know when we're gonna see Koza again. I don't know if he's gonna be part of like some type of Alabasta military force showing up to try to help with anything at some point in time. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But that's what I have here. I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.